Hey, sixth graders, it's Mrs. Decker again. I want to share with you to start out today a few excerpts from one of my favorite childhood books called Don't Give Up, Josephine by Hans Willem. So this picture book left a deep mark on me. And as a child, I still remember the illustrations and the words and the feeling of this book when my mom would read it to me. And here are some of the reasons why. In this section of the book, Josephine is going to dance school for the first time. She's a little nervous about it. I remember thinking as a kid, she's going to do it. She's going to be the best dancer. And then when she tries, it turns out she's not so good yet. She goes back to her other friends pretty sad. And let me show you the next scene that I wanted to point out. She has some friends and they all are really encouraging. And I remember as a kid thinking, I loved that. Don't give up, Josephine. You can do it. We know you can do it. And they're really encouraging her and making her feel better. Well, from that, Josephine decides, okay, maybe I'm not as good of a butterfly, but what if I try my own dance moves? And it turns out she is the best snow bunny in the whole class. And pretty soon, all of the friends and classmates are trying to be snow bunnies like her. Again, this book from my childhood really gives me strong memories of feeling like I could try new things and try and not give up, just like Josephine. So I want you to take a minute and think of a book from your childhood that affected you deeply, or that you still remember because it left a deep impact on you or your reading life, meaning it made you want to read more or become a reader. And for some, your brain might be filled with a lot of books right now that you can remember. And for others, you might be thinking, I'm not really sure, and that's okay too. Today, I want to teach you that readers develop personal reading identities based on their history of books. And we call that a textual lineage, their history of books or authors that they've read throughout the years. And these are different books that have affected them in different ways. And you can become more aware of these books by reflecting on them and creating your own textual lineage or your own book history. I'd love to show you what mine looks like. So this would be called my textual lineage. And watch me as I do a little thinking and noticing about this. As I just kind of brainstorm some of my book history. Also, notice how I remember them and reflect on them to help me make plans for my reading today and in the days ahead, moving forward, okay? You're gonna get to try this work on your own today later, so tune in. I started out with the earliest memories of reading and some of the books that I remember loving, like Clifford, the Big Red Dog, and The Pokey Little Puppy, and how that puppy was so cute. It just happens to look like my dog Winnie today. And there's not a coincidence that I love Boston Terriers. Also, Strega Nona was a special book because it had great illustrations, and my mom, who was an art teacher, just loved reading it to me. So I put in blue some of my earliest reads. Then I started moving into later years, like elementary years, and I remember falling in love with Ramona Quimby, a character, and some of the highlights magazines that would come in the mail for me. I also loved Calvin and Hobbes and getting a chance to check out a new Calvin and Hobbes book from the Shepherdson Elementary Media Center. And all of the books by this author were books that I couldn't wait to get my hands on. The Witches, James and the Giant Peach. Then as I moved into upper elementary school and middle school, I started reading books about, like, series of books. For example, The Babysitter's Club or Nancy Drew. I loved YM Magazine. And I remember it just me thinking how cool all of those girls looked in the magazine. I also enjoyed books like A Wrinkle in Time or The Indian in the Cupboard. But now as I'm looking at this top row, I'm noticing that as a kid, I really didn't necessarily read a lot of books about characters that were different than me. I read a lot of books about characters like me, or books that were maybe sensationalized a type of person, for example, The Indian in the Cupboard, and maybe didn't portray that culture in a realistic way. So I am curious as I keep moving forward if that trend continues or if I start opening up to more books that are windows into other worlds as well. So then I went into high school and I started reading books that were required, like To Kill a Mockingbird, Romeo and Juliet, The Iliad and the Odyssey, The Scarlet Letter, and Little Women. And as I sure enjoyed these books, but they were also books that I was told to read. And as I continued, I started noticing books that I was continuing to think about a lot, like Animal Farm or Fahrenheit 451. And of course, Harry Potter. That changed my world and opened up a whole new perspective about what fantasy books could be and how I might really like that genre more than I expected. And then there are some very special young adult novels that I started reading when I became a teacher, like Bud Not Buddy and Holes, that relit my excitement for young adult literature again. And now I'm moving into kind of my current reads. Sorry if that's hard to see. I'm going to move this up a little. But some of the books that I would say are more recent reads from my adult life have been books that have also affected me, like The Alchemist or The Kite Runner or The Help and Tuesdays with Morrie. So this is called my textual lineage. And I notice, like I said, today you might think about making a list of authors and books that you've read from your past, almost like your timeline, your book history. The other thing you might choose to do today is make a different type of notebook page. This one I created about the authors and books that have affected me deeply. And I kind of categorized them because that was what worked for me in my brain. So some of my childhood favorites, for example, like Don't Give Up Josephine or A Wrinkle in Time, Number the Stars, and of course Hatchet, I loved. Some authors that have really been special for me, or authors that I notice I always want to read their next book, even if I don't know what it's about. And those are authors like Brene Brown, Kwame Alexander, Jerry Spinelli, who wrote Stargirl, and a lot of other books that I've loved. Then there are some series of books. Have you ever read a book at the beginning of a series and it was so good that you can't wait for the next one and the next one, and you love it because now you have all of these books? My son just finished reading Land of Stories, the series of books. Wow, he was hooked from the first one, and how awesome. He had 5 more books to read after the first one. He loved it. I love some of these series, and some from my childhood, some from more recent years too. And then, of course, some recent reads that have impacted me. For example, The Big Thirst. It's all about water and how we use water on our planet. And it's fascinating. The Omnivore's Dilemma was also a really interesting book for me to read about how we should eat food, mostly plants, not too much. I thought that was good advice. So you'll notice the reason I did this also is because what I'm trying to do is see, what is my history with reading? And what are some different books and authors that have affected me? And how often am I choosing to read books that are about my world and characters just like me? And how often am I choosing books that provide a window into other perspectives and other worlds as well? Those two things can be really good for you to think about today. So as you get started with some of your own work time, I'd like you just to recap and consider what's going to be your plan for this afternoon for your work time, okay? Are you going to make a reading timeline like mine, but with your own books? In other words, a textual lineage. If you finish that, maybe you would consider spending some time reading and really keep practicing that goal of increasing the volume of your reading and having stamina to be able to read 35 to 40 pages of a book in one sitting. Maybe you'll consider what's missing from your textual lineage and shop for some of those books that could fill those gaps. Maybe those books that you're shopping for could match some of the reasons why you read, which is what we talked about in session 1. So readers, I really look forward to seeing how you are making, how how you're making your reading life meaningful. And in the coming weeks, that's one of our biggest goals as sixth graders. So I want you to look at how you're making that meaningful based on where you've come as a reader and what some of your history of reading has been. All right, good luck.